All right, let's unpack this fascinating world of focus,
Specific?
hyperfocus and scatterfocus. Our source material today excerpts from the book Hyperfocus, The New Science of Attention, Productivity, and Creativity. We're going to guide you through some key insights about these two attention modes and
Yeah.
how they impact our everyday lives.
You know, what I find fascinating is that the author starts off with a scene we can all relate to, like a bustling diner.
Hmm.
He describes folks, glued to their smartphones, a guy lost in thought ordering breakfast, another jotting down an idea he got while watching football highlights.
A daydream.
It's attention in action all around us.
Absolutely. And, that simple observation leads to a pretty profound realization that attention is constantly running in the background of our lives, whether we're like consciously directing it or not.
Right.
It's like a constant hum. And what's kind of refreshing is that the author, even as a productivity expert, admits he also struggles with distractions in our device-driven world.
Yeah.
So, okay, we've heard these terms. What do they actually mean in practical terms?
So, hyperfocus. Think of it as that laser-sharp focus you experience when you're completely absorbed in a task. It's that flow state where time seems to vanish and you're incredibly productive.
Yeah.
You ever just get engrossed in a project and completely lose track of time?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That's hyperfocus.
And scatter focus, is that just letting your mind wander aimlessly?
Well, it might seem that way at first glance. Scatter focus is more than just daydreaming. It's about letting your mind kind of explore freely, making connections without a specific goal in mind. Imagine you're taking a walk without your phone. You're open to whatever catches your attention.
Yeah.
And that's often where the magic happens.
So it's not necessarily about being unproductive. It's about tapping into a different kind of mental process. I'm starting to see how both of these could be valuable in their own way. What's happening in our brains when we're switching between these modes? Like, is it just a mental shift or is there actually something else going on?
Well, there are neurological processes at play. You see, hyperfocus and scatterfocus, they engage different brain networks. So it's not just about willpower. We need to kind of understand how our brains work to leverage these modes effectively.
So we can't just force ourselves to focus.
Exactly.
Or be creative on demand. There's a science behind it. That makes sense. But in today's world, staying focused feels like a constant battle against distractions.
Yeah.
Is there a way to, win that battle?
The book dives into this, starting with something called attention residue, which is a major culprit in derailing focus.
Yeah.
Imagine, switching tasks, but your mind is still stuck on the previous one.
Yeah.
It's like you're carrying mental baggage from one task to the next.
Oh, I know that feeling. Starting a new task, but those thoughts from the previous one keep popping up.
Exactly.
Is that actually affecting my productivity?
Absolutely. The book says that attention residue can make tasks take up to 50% longer to complete.
Wow. 50%.
Yeah, that lingering mental clutter can really add up.
I knew multitasking wasn't efficient, but I didn't realize it was that significant.
Right.
How do we get rid of this attention residue?
Okay, so one simple but effective technique is to take short breaks after finishing tasks.
Okay.
Instead of jumping to the next thing on your list, just give your mind a few moments to reset. Even a 5-minute break can make a big difference.
That makes sense. It's like clearing the cache on your computer.
Exactly.
I need to hit refresh sometimes.
Oh.
What are some other ways that we can kind of manage this attention residue?
Minimizing interruptions is key. If you're constantly switching gears because of emails, messages, or, requests,
Yep.
that attention residue is just going to build up. Try setting boundaries, silencing those notifications, or even put up a do not disturb sign on your door.
I love that. So taking control instead of being hijacked by distractions.
Speaking of attention, the book also talks about the limits of our attentional space. Is it like a container that can only hold so much?
Yeah, that's a great analogy. The book describes attentional space as a limited resource.
We can only juggle so much information at once. Remember trying to memorize a grocery list while having a conversation?
Oh, yeah.
That's your attentional space overflowing.
It's like trying to cram too many files onto a flash drive. Eventually just can't handle it.
Right.
So if our attentional space is limited, are we doomed to just be overwhelmed by the constant flow of information?
Not necessarily.
Mm.
While we can't magically expand our attentional space, we can learn to manage it more effectively. The book offers some practical strategies for doing just that,
Okay.
which we'll get into in the next part of our deep dive.
I'm looking forward to learning those strategies. But before we move on, I'm curious. You mentioned expertise can actually expand attentional space. How does that work?
Think of it as chunking information. Experts in a field have organized vast amounts of knowledge into meaningful clusters so they can process those complex ideas more efficiently. The book uses the example of remembering names. It's easier to remember a list of 10 names if you can group them into categories like friends from college or colleagues from work.
So the more we learn about a topic, the more efficiently we can process information related to it.
Exactly.
It's like upgrading our mental RAM. But even with a supercharged mental RAM, we still have to deal with those pesky distractions, right?
You got it. And the book doesn't shy away from addressing them head on. In fact, it breaks distractions down into 4 main categories: internal, external, auditory, and visual. Internal distractions are those thoughts, worries, and to-do list items that pop into our heads. External distractions are things in our environment, like that tempting smartphone, or a noisy coworker, or even a cluttered desk.
And then auditory and visual distractions are pretty self-explanatory.
Right.
Anything we hear or see that pulls our attention away
Exactly.
from the task at hand, it feels like we're constantly bombarded by these distractions.
We are. But the good news is that there are strategies for dealing with each type. For example, creating a distraction-free work environment. You can declutter your workspace, disable those notifications, and set specific times to check email and social media.
That's all great advice, but does the book offer any, particularly unique or surprising strategies?
There's one story that stands out. It mentions a CEO who equipped his entire team with desk lamps and squirt guns.
Squirt guns. That sounds like a scene from a comedy movie. What were those for?
Well, the lamps signaled focus time,
Okay.
and the squirt guns were for anyone who dared to interrupt. It's a playful but effective way to enforce boundaries and, create a culture of respect for focused work.
I love that. It's a lighthearted way to address a serious issue. We've covered
Yeah.
a lot of ground already. Hyperfocus, scatterfocus, attention residue, the limits of our attentional space, and those ever-present distractions.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here?
Now that we understand the challenges, it's time to explore the solutions. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll uncover some of the practical strategies the book offers for harnessing the power of both hyperfocus and scatterfocus. Get ready for some actionable insights that you can apply to your own life. So, ready to unlock the power of both hyperfocus and scatterfocus? Let's dive into some practical strategies from the book. One of the most powerful is setting clear intentions. Before you even attempt to hyperfocus, you need to be crystal clear about what you want to achieve.
So it's like programming your mental GPS.
Exactly.
You don't know the destination, you're just going to end up driving in circles.
The book highlights research showing that specific intentions are far more effective than vague ones. Think about it. Saying, I want to work on my presentation is much less powerful than saying, I'm going to spend the next hour outlining the key points of my presentation using the research I gathered yesterday.
Okay, so instead of a general goal, I need a laser-focused target. Be specific about what I'm doing and when I'm doing it. Makes sense. Even with a clear intention, sometimes it's hard to actually get started and stay focused, right?
Absolutely. The book suggests setting what are called implementation intentions. These link your intended action to a specific time and place. So you could say, when I sit down at my desk at 9:00 a.m. tomorrow, I'm going to work on my presentation outline. This creates a mental trigger that makes it much easier to get started.
It's like setting an alarm for your brain. What about those external distractions we talked about? How do we create a space where hyperfocus can actually thrive?
Minimizing those distractions is key. Create a distraction-free zone.
Yeah.
Tidy your workspace, silence your phone, and close unnecessary tabs on your computer. The fewer things competing for your attention, the better.
Out of sight, out of mind, right. And I've heard that using a timer can be helpful, but doesn't that create a sense of pressure?
The timer isn't about pressure. It's about creating a clear boundary for your focus session. The author actually even uses his phone as a timer. But if your phone's a distraction, put it on airplane mode or use a separate timer. The key is finding what works for you.
Okay. A little bit of structure can go a long way. What about those internal distractions, those random thoughts and worries that pop into your head? How do you deal with those?
That's where managing internal resistance comes in. It's that initial reluctance we feel when facing a challenging task. That feeling when your brain tries to convince you that checking email is suddenly way more urgent than tackling that big project.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a pro at finding ways to procrastinate.
Right. So how do we overcome that?
Yeah.
Well, instead of fighting it, the book suggests acknowledging those thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
Recognize that they're normal, then gently redirect your attention back to your intention. It's like saying, okay, I hear you, brain, but we've got work to do.
So it's about working with my brain, not against it.
Exactly.
Okay. This is all making sense for hyperfocus, but what about scatter focus? How do we intentionally cultivate that state of mind wandering?
This is where things get really interesting. The book challenges us to rethink boredom. Believe me, it's not about staring at blank walls.
Okay, I'm intrigued. I have to admit, I tend to avoid boredom at all costs.
Right.
But I'm sensing there's more to it than I realize.
Well, the author actually conducted a month-long experiment where he intentionally made himself bored for an hour each day.
Wait, he intentionally made himself bored? What did that involve?
He engaged in a variety of kind of unconventional activities, staring at a slowly rotating fan blade, watching a dripping faucet, you name it. The point was to show that boredom, often seen as this negative thing, can be incredibly fertile ground for creativity.
So instead of reaching for our phones or, filling every spare moment with activity, we should embrace those moments of quiet and allow our minds to wander.
Exactly. When we're constantly bombarded with stimulation, our brains don't have the space to make those unexpected connections that often lead to like creative breakthroughs.
Makes me think of all those times I've had, great ideas in the shower or on a walk, those moments when I'm not actively trying to think.
Precisely. Those aha moments often come when we least expect them, when our minds are relaxed and free to wander.
So how do we incorporate both hyperfocus and scatter focus into our, busy lives? It seems like they require completely different environments and mindsets.
The key is to be intentional about scheduling dedicated time for both modes. For hyperfocus, block out distraction-free time in your calendar to tackle those demanding tasks. And then for scatter focus, schedule breaks throughout the day where you disconnect from technology and engage in activities that allow your mind to wander freely.
So it's not just about like squeezing these modes into random moments.
Right.
It's about being strategic and creating space for them in our schedules. But how do we know when to do what? There are times when I'm naturally more alert and focused, and then other times when my energy just kind of dips.
Yeah, you're bringing up a great point. The book dives into this concept of energy rhythms.
Hmm.
Most people experience, peak mental energy in the late morning and mid-afternoon. Those are ideal times for those hyperfocus sessions.
So front load those demanding tasks and save the afternoon slump for something less intense.
Exactly. As your energy naturally dips, leverage that time for scatter focus activities. Take a walk, have a conversation, or do something creative that doesn't require that intense focus.
This is starting to feel like a recipe for a much more, balanced and productive day.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, even with the best intentions and a perfectly crafted schedule, there are times when our energy just kind of tanks. What then?
Well, the book offers a few more tricks up its sleeve. It explores how music can enhance focus, the importance of investing in your happiness, and even the strategic use of caffeine.
Wait, caffeine can actually boost productivity. I thought it was just a quick energy fix.
It can be, but the book highlights research showing that caffeine can actually enhance cognitive performance, particularly on tasks requiring, focus and attention. Of course, moderation is key, and everyone responds to caffeine differently.
Yeah.
So pay attention to how it affects you.
Okay, so that afternoon cup of coffee might be more than just a pick-me-up.
Exactly.
It could be like a secret weapon for getting things done. We've covered a lot of ground here, but I still have one big question. Does mastering focus require us to become, like, experts in everything?
Well,
It feels like we're being asked to juggle so much.
it's not about becoming like a walking encyclopedia, but about being intentional about the information you consume and the experiences you seek out. The book talks about, collecting and connecting dots. Every piece of information, every experience is a dot. And it's those connections between the dots that lead to those new ideas and insights.
So it's not just about the quantity of information, but the quality and how it connects to our existing knowledge.
Precisely. The book even suggests viewing every book, article, podcast, or even social media post as a pitch for your time and attention.
Okay.
Before you click on that next link or pick up that next book, ask yourself, is this information worth my time and attention? Will it help me connect dots in a meaningful way?
That's such a powerful shift in perspective. It's about being more discerning, I guess, with what we allow into our mental space. And I imagine this applies to like offline experiences as well.
Absolutely. Engaging in meaningful conversations, pursuing hobbies that challenge you, even just taking a walk in nature. All these activities provide those valuable dots that you can later connect to fuel your creativity and productivity.
This is starting to feel less like a productivity hack and more like a philosophy for living a more, engaged and fulfilling life. But even with this new perspective, I'm still feeling a bit overwhelmed. Is there a simple way to sum up all of this?
Yeah, the key takeaway here is that you have more control over your attention than you might realize. By understanding, the science behind hyperfocus and scatterfocus, and by implementing these practical strategies, you can become more focused, productive, and creative. It's not about achieving some arbitrary level of perfection, but about continuously learning, experimenting, and refining your approach.
So it's a journey, not a destination.
Exactly.
And it sounds like a pretty fascinating journey, even if it includes a few staring contests with fan blades.
Right.
This has been incredibly insightful. But I'm curious to hear the author's final thoughts on this topic. What are his, parting words of wisdom?
Well, his final message is really one of hope and empowerment.
Okay.
He emphasizes that this journey to better focus, it isn't about becoming superhuman. It's about learning to work with your brain, not against it.
Yeah.
And he acknowledges that he still struggles with procrastination and distractions, just like all of us.
It's reassuring to know that even like a productivity expert has those moments. It makes this whole concept of focus feel much more attainable.
Yeah. And that's what makes the book so valuable.
Yeah.
It's not just like a collection of tips and tricks. It's a genuine exploration of the human experience of attention. He encourages us to be patient with ourselves, embrace the messiness of the process, and celebrate those small victories along the way.
That's a refreshing perspective. It's not about achieving some, arbitrary level of perfection, but continuously learning,
Right.
experimenting, and refining our approach.
Exactly. It's a lifelong practice, not a destination.
Yeah.
And he reminds us that better focus isn't just about getting more done.
Right.
It's about living a more engaged, creative, and fulfilling life.
This has been an incredible deep dive. We've learned so much about the science of attention, the power of intention, and the surprising benefits of, boredom and even caffeine.
Yeah.
But most importantly, we've learned that we have more control over our attention than we often realize.
Absolutely. By understanding the interplay of hyperfocus and scatterfocus, you can really unlock new levels of productivity and creativity. It's about finding that sweet spot where focused work and mind wandering can coexist and even enhance each other.
And it's about being intentional with our time and attention, choosing to focus on what truly matters. This deep dive has given us a solid foundation, and now it's up to each of us to, continue the exploration and discover what works best for us.
Enjoy the journey. It's a fascinating one, full of unexpected discoveries and those aha moments. And remember, you're not alone in this.
Yeah.
We all struggle with focus, but by understanding how our attention works, we can harness its power to create a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
Well said. This deep dive has left me with a lot to think about, and I'm excited to start putting these insights into practice. I'm curious, as you reflect on all we've discussed, what stands out to you?
What strikes me is this idea that distractions, well, they aren't necessarily the enemy. What if, instead of constantly battling them, we could learn to, strategically leverage them to fuel our creativity? What if those moments of boredom or mind wandering are actually essential ingredients in the recipe for innovation?
That's a fascinating question to ponder. We've only scratched the surface of this topic, and there's so much more to discover about the power of attention. This deep dive has given us a great starting point. I encourage you to continue exploring these concepts, experimenting with different strategies, and discovering what works best for you. Remember, the journey to better focus is a personal one, and the rewards are well worth the effort.